I've always believed in the simple truths of life. The sun rises in the east. Spring follows winter. People are who they claim to be. But on that ordinary Tuesday in September, everything I thought I knew about reality shattered like a mirror dropped on hardwood floors. The morning began like any other in our quiet Willow Creek neighborhood in San Antonio. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen. Windows of the home where I'd lived for 30 years, where I'd raised my 2 sons after their father passed. At 65, I, Eleanor Grant, had settled into the comfortable rhythms of suburban life, tending to my garden, hosting book club meetings, and doting on my 7-year-old grandson Julian whenever I had the chance. I was wiping down the kitchen counters when I heard the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel. Through the window, I watched Judy Thompson, my next-door neighbor of 20 years, hurrying across my front lawn with unusual purpose, her silver bob bouncing with each determined step. "Eleanor," she called, barely waiting for me to open the door. Her voice carried that particular tone reserved for neighborhood gossip, urgent, breathless, slightly conspiratorial. "I just saw Natalia going into your house through the side door. Is everything all right?" I frowned, setting my dishcloth aside. "Natalia? Daniel's wife? She's not here today." Judy's eyebrows shot up. "I swear I just saw her, not 5 minutes ago. Navy blue blouse, that leather handbag she always carries." She leaned in closer. I called out to her, but she didn't turn around. Thought it was strange, but figured she was in a hurry. "Maybe you saw someone else," I suggested, though Natalia's sleek dark hair and graceful posture were distinctive enough. "Julian's at school, and Daniel mentioned they were both tied up with work today." Judy seemed unconvinced, but nodded anyway. "Must have been my mistake. These new bifocals aren't what they promised," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Anyway, are we still on for book club Thursday?" We chatted for another minute before she left, but her words lingered like a strange perfume. Had someone entered my house? I did a quick walk through, living room, dining room, the downstairs bathroom, finding nothing out of place. Must have been a misunderstanding, I decided. Judy's eyesight hadn't been the same since her cataract surgery last spring. I'd just settled back into my kitchen routine when my phone rang. The screen displayed Gabriel, my youngest son's name, bringing an immediate smile to my face. At 33, he'd fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a pilot, a career that kept him constantly airborne and rarely in one place for long. "Mom," his voice came through with that slight echo that always accompanied his calls from airports or plane cabins. "Quick question, is Natalia at the house with you?" The question struck me as odd. "No, honey. Why would she be here?" "That's weird," Gabriel said, his tone shifting. "She told Daniel she was meeting you for lunch today. Something about helping with Julian's birthday plans." I frowned. "I haven't spoken to her in days, Gabriel." "Huh." There was a pause, the background. Noise of an airport terminal humming through the line. "Well, I'm just boarding my flight to Miami. Maybe there was a mix-up." "Must be," I agreed, though something felt off. "When will you be back in town?" "Thursday night, assuming weather cooperates." "Hey, I should go. They're calling my section." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, staring at the phone. A strange coincidence. Judy seeing someone she thought was Natalia, and now Gabriel mentioning her too. I shook off the feeling and returned to loading the dishwasher, only to be interrupted by the phone ringing again barely 10 minutes later. "Mom." Gabriel's voice was different now, tight, almost strangled. "Something really weird is happening." "What's wrong?" I asked, instantly alert to the fear in his voice. "I just boarded the flight. And," he hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper, "Natalia is here, on my flight, in first class." My hand gripped the counter. "That can't be right. I'm looking at her right now," Gabriel insisted. "Same haircut, same jewelry she always wears. That silver necklace Daniel got her for their anniversary." "Maybe it's someone who looks like her?" I suggested, though even to my own ears the explanation sounded hollow. "Mom, she had her passport out. I saw her name, Natalia Grant. It's her." A chill ran down my spine. "Gabriel, that's impossible. Judy Thompson just told me she saw Natalia entering my house not 20 minutes ago." The silence on his end stretched like taffy. "Mom," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "If Natalia's on my flight to Miami, then who did Judy see? Going into your house?" My mouth went dry. "I checked the house already. There's no one." That's when I heard it. A soft creak from upstairs. The distinctive sound of the floorboard outside the guest bathroom, the one that always protested under any weight. My heart lurched against my ribs. "Gabriel, I think someone's in the house," I whispered. Mom, get out now, he demanded urgently. Call 911. I'm going to check. No! His voice was sharp. Mom, please, just leave. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Disbelief, curiosity, or perhaps that stubborn streak my late husband always claimed would be the death of me. Let me call you back, I murmured, ending the call despite Gabriel's protests. I stood perfectly still, listening. Another creak, followed by the unmistakable sound of, running water. Someone was using my upstairs shower. My mind raced through possibilities. A break-in? But burglars don't typically stop for a shower. A homeless person seeking shelter? But how would they have a key? With my heart hammering against my ribs, I grabbed the heavy flashlight we kept for emergencies, the closest thing to a weapon within reach, and slowly climbed the stairs, each step deliberate and quiet. The shower stopped just as I reached the top landing. I heard movement behind the bathroom door, the soft rustle of a towel, the gentle click of a toiletry bottle being set down. I raised the flashlight, poised to defend myself, when the bathroom door swung open. Standing there, wrapped in my guest towel, hair dripping onto her shoulders, was Natalia, my daughter-in-law of 8 years. She looked exactly as she always did, except for the surprise that flashed across her face upon seeing me. "Eleanor!" she exclaimed with a startled laugh. "You scared me! I didn't think you were home." I stared at her, flashlight still raised, my mind unable to process what my eyes were seeing. Because if Natalia was here, towel-wrapped and freshly showered, then who was sitting on my son's Miami-bound flight? "Is everything okay?" she asked, her expression growing concerned as my silence stretched. My phone began ringing again in my hand. Gabriel's name flashed on the screen. "Yes," I said finally to Natalia, though my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "Everything's fine." I answered the phone, my eyes never leaving the woman before me. "Yes, she's here," I confirmed. To Gabriel, watching as Natalia smiled and disappeared into the guest bedroom. "She just finished showering upstairs." Gabriel's shocked voice whispered through the line. "No, Mom, that's impossible. She just settled into her seat. I'm looking at her right now." The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. And then I heard it. Soft, unmistakable footsteps creaking on the stairs behind, me. I turned slowly, terror creeping up my spine like ivy on an old brick wall. Standing at the top of the stairs was Natalia. Again. Identical to the woman who had just walked into the guest bedroom, but fully dressed in a navy blue blouse and dark jeans, her damp hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "Eleanor?" she called softly, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." My mind scrambled to make sense of what my eyes were witnessing. 2 Natalias, one emerging from my shower, another appearing from nowhere, and a third, according to Gabriel, buckled into a first-class seat bound for Miami. "Gabriel," I whispered into the phone, "I need to call you back." I disconnected before he could protest. "Who's in the bedroom?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I expected. The woman on the stairs. "Natalia? Not Natalia?" Tilted her head. "What do you mean? I just got here. Judy let me in. I told her I forgot my key." As if summoned by her words, the guest bedroom door opened, and the towel-wrapped figure emerged, now dressed in yoga pants and a loose sweater. Her eyes widened at the sight of her double, and for a breathless moment, the 3 of us formed a bizarre tableau, me with my flashlight still raised, and 2 identical women staring at each other with mirrored expressions of shock. Then the woman from the bedroom started laughing, a rich musical sound so familiar and yet somehow different from Natalia's usual controlled chuckle. "Oh, this is not how I planned this," she said, her accent slightly stronger than Natalia's. Carefully modulated tones. "I suppose we should explain, Eleanor, before you have a heart attack." The woman on the stairs, the real Natalia, I realized, sighed deeply. "Elisa, I told you to wait for me in Boston. We agreed." "Elisa?" I echoed, looking between them. "My sister," Natalia said, moving to stand beside me. She squeezed my arm gently. "My twin sister, whom I've never mentioned. Because..." She paused, something complicated passing across her face. "Because she pretends I don't exist," Elisa finished, approaching us with an easy grace that mimicked Natalia's movements with uncanny precision. Up close I could see subtle differences. Elisa's smile reached her eyes more readily, and a small scar marked the edge of her right eyebrow. "That's not true," Natalia protested. But the tension between them was palpable. My phone rang again. Gabriel, persistent as always. I answered, putting it on speaker. Mom, are you okay? Who's there? His voice rang through the hallway. I'm fine, Gabriel, I assured him, though fine felt like a gross misrepresentation of my current state. There's been a misunderstanding. Natalia is here with me, and so is her sister. Her sister? Gabriel sounded confused. Natalia doesn't have a sister. Elisa leaned toward the phone. Hello, Gabriel. I've heard so much about you. Your mother is lovely. Thank you for sharing her. Her voice was so similar to Natalia's that I doubted Gabriel could tell the difference, but there was a warmth to it that Natalia often lacked. Who is this? Gabriel demanded. Elisa Torres, she replied. Natalia's twin, the slightly prettier one. Natalia rolled her eyes, a gesture so uncharacteristic that I nearly laughed despite the situation. But Gabriel sounded completely lost now. Who's on my flight? Natalia and Elisa exchanged a look that contained volumes. That would be Jimena, Natalia finally said. Our other sister. I felt like I needed to sit down. Other sister? Another twin? Triplet, Elisa corrected with a small smile. Identical triplets, to be precise. A genetic anomaly our mother found both miraculous and exhausting. Gabriel's stunned silence matched my own. Finally, he spoke. So there are 3 of you? And none of you thought this was worth mentioning? To your husband? To your family? Natalia's posture stiffened. It's complicated, Gabriel. I'll explain everything when you return. For now, can you just keep an eye on Jimena? Make sure she doesn't cause trouble? The flight attendant is giving me the evil eye, Gabriel muttered. I have to go. But when I get back, full explanation, Natalia promised. I'm sorry. After Gabriel hung up, I led both women downstairs to the kitchen. My mind reeled with questions, but first I needed tea, the strong English breakfast blend I saved for emergencies. This certainly qualified. As water boiled and tea steeped, I studied the sisters sitting across from each other at my kitchen table. Identical yet distinct, like the same melody played in different keys. I want to understand, I said, finally setting cups before them. Why the secrecy? And why is one of you flying to Miami on my son's plane? Elisa sipped her tea, watching Natalia over the rim of her cup. There was challenge in her gaze and something else. Hurt, perhaps, or resentment. Natalia squared her shoulders, that familiar gesture she used when preparing to deliver difficult news to Daniel or Julian. It started when we were children in Caracas, she began. Our father was an important man, with dangerous business connections. A criminal, Elisa clarified bluntly. Call it what it was, Natalia. He was a money launderer for the cartels. Natalia's jaw tightened. When authorities started closing in, our mother took us and fled. She split us up for safety. Jimena went to relatives in Colombia. I was sent to cousins in Miami. And Elisa, I got the short straw, Elisa interjected with a bitter smile. A distant aunt in Boston who viewed me as both a burden and a convenient unpaid nanny for her 4 children. We were 13, Natalia continued. We promised to reunite when we turned 18, but by then we'd grown into different people with different lives. Jimena was dancing professionally in Bogota. I was at university in Florida. Elisa was in trouble, Elisa finished, something darkening in her expression. Let's just say I made some poor choices that made reunion inadvisable. I looked between them, seeing the strain of old wounds. And now? Why are you all suddenly in the same country? The same city? Natalia looked down at her hands. Our mother is dying. Cancer. She's in hospice care in Miami. That's where Jimena is going. And where you were supposed to be. Going, I said slowly, understanding dawning. You were meant to be on that flight with your sister. Natalia nodded. Daniel doesn't know about my family, about our past. He thinks I'm an only child whose parents died in a car accident years ago. It was easier that way, cleaner. I built a new life here, with him and Julian. So you sent Jimena ahead, I guessed, while you figured out what to tell Daniel. Yes, she admitted. But Elisa wasn't supposed to be part of this plan. She shot her sister an accusing look. Elisa shrugged unapologetically. I got tired of waiting. 20 years, Natalia. 20 years pretending we don't exist because we don't fit into your perfect American life. I wanted to meet your son, your husband, the mother-in-law you actually speak fondly of, unlike your own mother who's dying without having met her grandson. The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. I tried to process everything, the secrets, the lies, the complicated web of identities spanning multiple countries. But most of all, I thought about Julian, my bright-eyed grandson who had no idea his mother's life was built on such shifting sands. "What happens now?" I asked, quietly. Before either could answer, the front door opened, and a child's voice called out, "Grandma, I'm home early. Teacher got sick." Julian's footsteps pattered across the entryway tiles. "Mom?" he called, confusion evident in his voice as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack still strapped to his small shoulders. His eyes widened as he took in the identical women at the kitchen table. "Why are there two mommies?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. The sisters exchanged a glance, and I wondered which of them would step forward to explain, and what truth or fiction they would offer to this child caught in the crossfire of their complicated past. Natalia moved first, crossing to Julian with practiced ease. She knelt before him, her hands gentle on his small shoulders. "Julian, sweetheart," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos I knew she must be feeling. "This is a very special surprise. This is your Aunt Elisa, my sister." Julian's eyes darted between the identical women, confusion evident in his furrowed brow. "You have a sister? Like how I have friends who are twins at school?" "Exactly like that," Elisa said, approaching cautiously. She knelt beside Natalia, creating a mirror image that made my head spin. "Your mom and I are twins. Actually, we're triplets. There are 3 of us who look exactly the same." Julian's expression shifted from confusion to wonder. 3 mommies? A delighted grin spread across his face. "That's so cool. Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" I watched pain flash across Natalia's features before she masked it with a smile. "It's a grown-up story, Julian. Sometimes families are complicated. Like Diego's parents who live in different houses?" Julian asked innocently. "Something like that," Natalia murmured, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Why don't you go upstairs and play your video game for a little while? We need to talk about some boring adult things." Julian seemed reluctant, his eyes still moving curiously between the identical women. "Can Aunt Elisa play Mario Kart with me later?" "I'd love to," Elisa replied with genuine warmth. "I bet I can beat your fastest time." "No way!" Julian laughed, then dashed upstairs, his backpack bouncing against his spine. Once his footsteps faded, Natalia rounded on her sister. "What were you thinking? Coming here like this, using my key, pretending to be me." "I wasn't pretending anything," Elisa defended. "I just wanted to see where my sister lived, to meet her family." Her voice softened. "To meet my nephew. By sneaking into Eleanor's house, taking a shower like you belong here?" "The flight was 14 hours, Natalia. I was exhausted." Elisa sighed, sinking into a kitchen chair. "And maybe I wanted to feel, just for a moment, what your life is like. The life you chose instead of us." The raw hurt in her words silenced Natalia momentarily. I took the opportunity to interject, trying to make sense of the situation. "Let me get this straight," I said, looking between them. "Your mother separated you for safety, and you chose to maintain that separation into adulthood. Natalia created a new identity here, married my son, and cut ties with her past. Now your mother is dying, and suddenly all 3 of you are converging. One here, one on a plane to Miami, and one waiting in Miami," Natalia finished. "Jimena arrived yesterday. She's been with our mother at the hospice." "And neither Daniel nor Gabriel know anything about this?" I continued. "About your real background, about your sisters." Natalia's shoulders slumped. "No." "Why?" I asked simply. "Fear," Elisa answered when Natalia remained silent. "Fear that her perfect American life would unravel if anyone knew about her drug-running father, her fragmented family, her years in the foster system after our cousin's family was deported." Natalia's head snapped up. "That's not fair. I wasn't ashamed. I was protecting everyone, including you and Jimena." "From what?" Elisa challenged. "From the past catching up to us." Natalia's voice trembled slightly. "From the people who might still be looking for Torres's daughters." A chill ran through me. "Your father's associates? After all these years?" "Some grudges don't expire," Natalia said quietly. "And some debts are inherited." I tried to process what she was saying. "Are you in danger? Is Julian?" "No," Natalia said firmly. "Not anymore. Father died in prison 5 years ago. Most of his former associates are dead or imprisoned. But old habits die hard. I spent so many years looking over my shoulder that reinvention became second nature." Elisa reached across the table, tentatively touching her sister's hand. "It's over now, Nat. It has been for years. You don't have to keep running." Natalia didn't pull, away from her sister's touch, but she didn't reciprocate either. It's not that simple. I built this life, Elisa. I became Natalia Grant. I love my husband, my son, my life here. How do I suddenly tell them that I've been living a lie? Not a lie, I said gently. An omission. The person Daniel married is still you. Your character, your heart. The rest is just history. My phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel. Updates? Flight attendant confiscated my phone for takeoff. Is everyone okay? I showed the message to the sisters. Gabriel will keep an eye on Jimena, but he deserves answers when he lands. And Daniel, I hesitated, knowing my elder son's pragmatic nature. Daniel deserves to hear this from you, Natalia. Before he meets your sisters. Natalia nodded slowly. I know. I've been avoiding it for too long. And Julian? Elisa asked softly. What will you tell him? A small smile touched Natalia's lips. The truth, I suppose. That he has two amazing aunts he's never met. That family is complicated but precious. That sometimes people make hard choices to protect the ones they love. I squeezed her shoulder. He's a resilient child. Children often handle these revelations better than we expect. Natalia looked up at me, vulnerability evident in her expression. And you, Eleanor? What do you think of me now? Knowing I've lied to your son for years? The question caught me off guard. I considered it carefully, searching my heart for the truth. I think, I said slowly, that we all have parts of ourselves we keep hidden, reasons that made sense at the time, choices we can't undo. What matters is where we go from here. Elisa watched this exchange with evident surprise. You're very understanding, Eleanor. I thought of my own secrets, the financial struggles I'd hidden from my sons after their father died, the depression I'd battled silently, the dreams I'd abandoned for their sake. Life is rarely black and white, I told her, especially family life. The key conversation was interrupted by the sound of Julian thundering back down the stairs. He burst into the kitchen with the exuberance only a 7-year-old could muster after being promised video games with a newly discovered aunt. Grandma, he announced, I need to show Aunt Elisa my room. Can we go upstairs? Of course, I agreed, grateful for the innocent interruption. Why don't you give her the grand tour? As Julian dragged Elisa upstairs, chattering excitedly about his dinosaur collection and soccer trophies, I turned to Natalia. What happens after Miami? After you see your mother? She looked lost, a rare vulnerability showing through her typically composed exterior. I don't know. 20 years of separation can't be fixed in a single hospice visit. Do you want to fix it? I asked gently. Natalia's eyes glistened. I don't know that either. When we were separated, I was heartbroken. We'd never been apart, not for a single day. Then suddenly I was alone, pretending to be someone else's daughter, in a strange country with a language I barely spoke. She twisted her wedding ring absently. By the time I found stability, found myself again, it seemed easier to keep moving forward than to look back. And now the past has found you anyway, I observed. She nodded. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Upstairs, we could hear Julian's excited voice showing Elisa his treasures, and her gentle responses. The domesticity of the moment contrasted sharply with the gravity of our kitchen conversation. What can I do to help? I asked, knowing that whatever happened next would affect my entire family. Daniel, Julian, even Gabriel. Natalia looked up, gratitude shining in her eyes. Just be here. For Julian especially. While I sort this out. Of course, I promised. That's what family does. A rueful smile touched her lips. Family. I've spent so long defining that word narrowly. Just Daniel and Julian. Sometimes I included you and Gabriel, but rarely anyone beyond that circle. It's not too late to expand the definition, I suggested. Before she could respond, my phone rang again. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I showed it to Natalia, whose face paled visibly. I'm not ready, she whispered. You don't have to do this alone, I reminded her, answering the call. Daniel, hello. Mom. My elder son's voice came through, warm but distracted. Is Natalia there? She's not answering her phone, and I wanted to check about Julian's dentist appointment tomorrow. I met Natalia's eyes, silently asking how she wanted to handle this. She took a deep breath, then reached for the phone. Daniel, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. We need to talk. Can you come home early today? While we waited for Daniel to arrive, the house hummed with an unusual energy. Julian, blissfully unaware of the emotional complexity swirling around him, had appointed himself Elisa's official tour guide. I could hear his animated voice upstairs, explaining the importance of each toy, book, and treasured object with the solemnity of a museum curator. Natalia paced the kitchen, rehearsing what she would say to her husband, under her breath. Occasionally she would stop, shake her head, and start again, discarding approaches that sounded too defensive or too clinical. I busied myself making a fresh pot of coffee, giving her space while remaining present. "How much should I tell him?" she finally asked, leaning against the counter. 20 years of secrets can't be unpacked in a single conversation. "Start with what's most immediate," I advised. "Your sister's, your mother's illness. The rest can come with time." She nodded, running a hand through her hair, a gesture I'd seen Daniel make countless times when troubled. It struck me how much of each other they had absorbed over their years together. How, despite the secrets between them, they had grown intertwined in the ways that only happen in a genuine marriage. "I've imagined this moment so many times," Natalia confessed, "especially when Julian was born. I thought about my mother, about how she would never know her grandson unless I broke my silence." She shook her head, but each year it became harder to explain why I'd waited so long. "The right time never comes for difficult conversations," I said, thinking of my own postponed truths. "We just have to make the moment right when it arrives." Upstairs, Julian's bedroom door opened, and he thundered down the stairs with Elisa following at a more measured pace. "Grandma! Mom! Aunt Elisa knows magic tricks!" Julian announced, eyes wide with wonder. "She made a quarter disappear and then pulled it out of my ear." Elisa smiled sheepishly. "A misspent youth working children's parties in Boston. The skills stick with you." Natalia looked at her sister with surprise. "You never mentioned that." "There's a lot we never mentioned," Elisa replied with a meaningful glance. 20 years creates quite a backlog of unshared stories. Julian tugged at Elisa's hand. "Can you show Mom the card trick too?" Before she could answer, the front door opened, and Daniel's familiar footsteps crossed the B-key entryway. Time seemed to slow as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame filling the space, briefcase still in hand. He froze, eyes moving from Natalia to Elisa and back again, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "What the—" he began, then glanced at Julian and amended, "What's going on?" Julian bounced on his toes with excitement. "Dad, this is Aunt Elisa. Mom has a twin sister. Actually, she has two. They're triplets, Dad. Isn't that cool?" Daniel's briefcase slipped from his fingers, landing with a dull thud on the tile floor. "Triplets," he repeated faintly. Natalia stepped forward, her composure visibly fragile. "Daniel, I can explain." "Yes," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I believe you should." I moved toward Julian, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Hey, buddy, how about you and I go check on that bird's nest in the backyard? The eggs might be hatching." Julian looked reluctant, sensing the tension in the room. "But I want to stay with Aunt Elisa. Your aunt will be here when we get back," I promised. "Your parents need to talk about grown-up things." Elisa knelt to Julian's level. "I'm not going anywhere, champ. In fact, maybe later we can convince your grandmother to make her famous chocolate chip cookies." She glanced up at me questioningly. I nodded, grateful for her intuition. "Absolutely. We'll need something to celebrate your aunt's visit, won't we, Julian?" Finally convinced, Julian allowed me to guide him outside to the backyard, where a robin had indeed built a nest in the oak tree near my kitchen window. As I lifted him up to peer cautiously at the blue eggs nestled within, I could see Daniel through the window, gesturing animatedly while Natalia spoke, her posture tense but determined. "Do birds have aunts and uncles too, Grandma?" Julian asked, his mind still processing the day's revelations. "They do," I confirmed. "Family is family, whether you have feathers or not." He considered this seriously. "So Aunt Elisa is like a bird that flew away from the nest for a long time? And now she's back?" Children's metaphors often cut straight to the heart of adult complexities. "That's a very good way of thinking about it, Julian." We spent 20 minutes examining the nest from a respectful distance, discussing robin families and bird migration patterns, anything to keep his curious mind engaged while his parents navigated their fraught conversation inside. When we finally returned to the kitchen, Daniel was sitting at the table, his face in his hands. Natalia stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, while Elisa had retreated to the window seat, giving them space. Daniel looked up as we entered, his expression complicated but not angry. "Hey, buddy," he said to Julian, his voice rough with emotion. Julian approached cautiously. Are you mad, Dad? Daniel shook his head, pulling his son into a tight hug. No, not mad, just surprised. It's a lot to take in. Like when I learned multiplication, Julian asked earnestly. My brain felt full and tired. A genuine laugh escaped Daniel. Exactly like that. My brain is very full right now. He looked over Julian's head at me, his eyes communicating silent gratitude for my presence, for the stability I represented in this moment of upheaval. I nodded slightly, letting him know I understood. Julian, Natalia said gently, why don't you show Dad the magic trick Aunt Elisa taught you? It might cheer him up. As Julian eagerly pulled a deck of cards from his pocket, I moved to stand beside Elisa at the window. How did he take it? I asked quietly. Better than I expected, she admitted. There was shock, of course. Some hurt at being kept in the dark. But mostly, she paused, watching Daniel laugh at Julian's clumsy attempt at card manipulation. Mostly, there's love. He really loves her. He does, I confirmed. Daniel has always been the steady one. Pragmatic, patient. Once he processes this, he'll be all right. And you? Elisa asked, studying me with curious eyes. You seem remarkably calm about discovering your daughter-in-law has a secret past and two identical sisters. I smiled faintly. At my age, you learn that everyone has chapters they don't read aloud. The question is whether those hidden pages change who they are in the present. And you don't think Natalia's do? I watched Natalia, her hand resting protectively on Daniel's shoulder as he interacted with Julian. The Natalia I've known for 8 years is a devoted mother, a loving wife, a woman who remembers everyone's birthdays and brings soup when we're sick. Nothing I've learned today changes those truths. Elisa's expression softened. She's lucky to have you. We all had to become excellent judges of character growing up. Necessity taught us that skill early. Natalia chose her new family well. Daniel rose from the table then, walking over to join us. Up close, I could see the emotional toll of the past hour in the lines around his eyes, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Mom, could you watch Julian for a few hours? Natalia needs to pack for Miami. We're all going. Tonight, if we can get tickets. Her mother shouldn't wait. I nodded, touched by his immediate understanding of what mattered most. Of course. He can stay the night if needed. Natalia approached, visibly moved by Daniel's decision. You don't have to come. This isn't your burden. Daniel took her hand firmly in his. Your family is my family. We'll face this together. Elisa cleared her throat. I should call Jimena, let her know we're all coming. She'll be relieved. She's been carrying this alone for weeks. As they moved into action, Daniel checking flights on his phone, Natalia and Elisa coordinating with the sister in Miami, Julian excitedly packing his traveling backpack with essential toys, I marveled at how quickly life could change. This morning, I had been a widow, living a quiet suburban life. Now I stood at the center of an unfolding family drama spanning multiple countries and identities. Yet amidst the chaos, I felt an unexpected sense of rightness. Families were meant to connect, to expand, to embrace the complications that come with loving, imperfect humans. Natalia's secret past didn't diminish her. If anything, it revealed the strength and resilience that had drawn my son to her in the first place. As evening approached and departure plans solidified, I found myself in the kitchen with Julian, making the promised cookies while the adults finalized details in the living room. He worked beside me with serious concentration, carefully measuring flour with his tongue caught between his teeth. Grandma, he said suddenly, looking up with flour-dusted cheeks, is it okay to have secrets? Considered his question carefully, aware of its weight. It depends on the secret, sweetheart. Some secrets protect people we love. Some secrets hurt them. The tricky part is knowing the difference. He nodded, absorbing this with the solemn wisdom children sometimes possess. Mom's secret was to protect us, right? From the bad guys who were after her dad? That's right, I confirmed, touched by his understanding. She did what she thought was best. Julian sprinkled chocolate chips into the dough with methodical precision. I'm glad the secret is over now. Secrets are heavy to carry. From the mouths of babes, I thought, feeling a tightness in my throat. Yes, they are, I agreed. Very heavy indeed. In the living room, I could hear the murmur of adult voices working through logistics and emotions. 3 people navigating a new reality with care and consideration. Despite the complexity of the situation, I felt a profound sense of hope. Truth, however delayed, created possibilities that secrets could never allow. As Julian and I slid the cookie sheet into the oven, I thought about the strange paths that bring families together, tear them apart, and reunite them in unexpected ways. Life rarely follows the narratives we craft for ourselves, but perhaps its unplanned chapters hold the deepest meaning. The house felt strangely empty after Daniel, Natalia, Elisa, and Julian left for Miami. I wandered from room to room, straightening cushions and collecting abandoned coffee cups, trying to process the whirlwind events of the day. My phone buzzed with a message from Gabriel. Landed in Miami. Weirdest flight of my career. Will call when I meet everyone at the hospice. I couldn't begin to imagine how Gabriel was feeling. As the family member with the least connection to Natalia, he'd been thrust into the middle of her family drama in the most disorienting way possible. I made a mental note to check in with him privately once the initial chaos settled. Sleep eluded me. That night, I lay awake thinking about Natalia's mother, a woman I'd been told was long dead, now dying for real in a Miami hospice. I thought about the three identical sisters, separated for protection and kept apart by fear and circumstance. Most of all, I thought about Julian, his young mind absorbing this seismic shift in his understanding of family with remarkable resilience. Morning came, with another text, this time from Daniel. At the hospice, hard to describe seeing three identical Natalias in one room. Mom holding on, but barely. Julian handling everything like a champ. More later. I went about my day mechanically, watering plants and paying bills, but my mind remained in Miami with my fragmented family. Around mid-afternoon, my phone rang. Gabriel calling as promised. Mom, he said without preamble, this is surreal. Tell me everything, I encouraged, settling into my favorite armchair. Gabriel sighed heavily. I don't even know where to begin. Jimena, that's the sister who was on my flight. She's identical to Natalia, but completely different. More animated, speaks with her hands, laughs louder. And Elisa? I asked, having only briefly met the middle sister. Somewhere in between. Quieter than Jimena, but more expressive than Natalia. It's like seeing three versions of the same person who took different paths. How's their mother? I asked gently. Gabriel's voice softened. Fragile. Cancer's ravaged her body, but her mind is sharp. She keeps touching their faces like she can't believe all three are finally together. And Daniel? Julian? Daniel's being Daniel, steady, practical, supportive. He's arranging meals, coordinating with hospital staff, creating space for the sisters to reconnect. Pride warmed Gabriel's voice. Julian's appointed himself everyone's official cheerleader. He's drawing pictures for his grandmother and telling her elaborate stories about his life in San Antonio. I smiled, picturing my grandson's animated storytelling. And you? How are you handling all this? Honestly, I feel like I've stepped into someone else's life. Yesterday, I was just a pilot heading to Miami for a routine flight. Today, I'm sitting in a hospice room watching a family reunion 20 years in the making. It's a lot to absorb, I acknowledged. The strangest part, Gabriel continued, is seeing how different the sisters are, despite looking identical. Natalia's always been so controlled, so measured. But Jimena talks about dancing professionally in Colombia, and Elisa mentions bartending in Boston and traveling through Europe with just a backpack. It makes me wonder what Natalia might have been if life had dealt her a different hand. That thought had crossed my mind as well. How much of Natalia's composed, perfectionist personality was innate, and how much was formed by her need to reinvent herself, to hide her past, to create safety in a world that had proven dangerous. When are you all coming back? I asked. That's the thing. I don't know. Their mother is declining rapidly. The doctors are saying days, maybe hours. No one wants to leave. He paused. But there's something else, Mom. Something I'm not sure Natalia has fully processed yet. What is it? Their mother has been living in a small apartment in Miami. It's filled with newspaper clippings, photos, school records, anything she could gather about her daughter's lives while they were apart. She's been following their careers, their moves, everything. Even Natalia's, though she was the hardest to track because she changed her name. My heart ached at the image of a mother separated from her children, desperately collecting fragments of their lives from afar. She never stopped being their mother, I murmured. Exactly. And there's more. She's been saving for them, every penny she could spare from her housekeeper's salary. It's not a fortune, but it's something she wanted them to have, to start fresh together if they chose to. Oh, Gabriel. Tears welled in my eyes. It's a mess, Mom. Beautiful and tragic and complicated. I don't know how any of us walk away from this the same. After we hung up, I sat in the growing dusk of my living room, thinking about transitions, about endings becoming beginnings, about the strange circular nature of family ties that can stretch across decades and continents without breaking. 3 days later, they returned. All of them. Daniel called ahead, his voice heavy with grief and exhaustion. "Mom, we're bringing everyone home. Carmen, Natalia's mother, passed yesterday. The sisters need time to process, and they don't want to be alone." "Of course," I said immediately. "I'll prepare the guest rooms." They arrived late that evening, a somber procession of exhausted travelers. Natalia, Elisa, and Jimena moved as a unit, their identical features marked by the same grief. Daniel carried a sleeping Julian, who stirred only briefly when transferred to his bed. Gabriel brought up the rear, managing luggage and watching over everyone with quiet concern. I embraced each of them at the door, including Jimena, whom I was meeting for the first time. Up close, I could see what Gabriel meant. Though physically identical to Natalia, she carried herself differently, with a dancer's posture and more expressive features. "Thank you for opening your home to us, Mrs. Grant," she said, her accent stronger than her sister's. "We are overwhelmed, Eleanor," I corrected gently. "And this is your family's home too now." The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality. The house, usually so quiet, now hummed with constant activity. The sisters moved through their grief in different ways. Jimena threw herself into cooking elaborate Venezuelan dishes in my kitchen, filling the house with unfamiliar spices and the comfort of their childhood foods. Elisa spent hours in the garden, her hands in the dirt, planting flowers she said her mother had loved. Natalia retreated into organization, arranging the small funeral, sorting through the few belongings their mother had left, making endless lists as if trying to impose order on chaos. Daniel and Gabriel orbited around them, offering support, creating space, filling in gaps. Julian moved between all the adults, instinctively offering comfort where it was needed most, a drawing for Jimena when tears overtook her while cooking, a wildflower picked for Elisa as she gardened, a quiet presence beside Natalia as she worked through her lists. One evening, about a week after their return, I found the three sisters in the living room after everyone else had gone to bed. They sat close together on the sofa, looking through a photo album their mother had kept, one of the treasures from her Miami apartment. "She saved everything," Natalia marveled, touching a faded photograph of 3 identical toddlers in matching dresses. "All these years I thought she'd moved on with her life, that we were painful reminders of the past. She never stopped searching for news of you," Jimena said softly. "The American daughter was the hardest to track," she always said, "especially after you changed your name." Natalia looked up, guilt clouding her expression. "I never thought, I just assumed. We all did what we needed to survive," Elisa interjected gently. "You built a safe life here. Jimena found purpose in dance. She hesitated. "I made more mistakes, took longer to find my way, but here we are, together again." "For how long?" Natalia asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken since their return. "What happens now?" The sisters fell silent, the weight of the future pressing down on them. I retreated quietly, leaving them to their private reckoning with grief and possibility. Later that night, unable to sleep, I made my way downstairs for tea. To my surprise, I found Daniel at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the moonlit garden. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, filling the kettle. He shook his head. "Too much to process." I sat across from him, studying my eldest son's face. The past week had etched new lines around his eyes, but there was a depth there too, a hard-won wisdom. "How are you handling all this?" I asked. Daniel took a measured sip of his whiskey. "It's strange. A week ago, I thought I knew my wife completely. Now I realize I've only known one version of her, the version she needed to be to feel safe. Does that change how you feel about her?" He considered this seriously. "Not in the ways that matter. If anything, I admire her more, knowing what she overcame. But I keep wondering what would have happened if she'd felt safe enough to tell me the truth from the beginning. What our marriage might have been like without that barrier between us." "Relationships are built layer by layer," I said. "Some layers are only revealed when the foundation is strong enough to bear their weight." Daniel smiled faintly. "When did you get so philosophical, Mom?" "Around the time my children started growing up and facing adult problems," I replied with a small smile of my own. The kettle whistled, and I rose to prepare my tea. "As I worked," Daniel continued, "the sisters are talking about living closer to each other. Jimena has a dance fellowship offer in Austin. Elisa's work as a freelance translator can be done anywhere. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, I'm still adjusting to the idea of Natalia having sisters at all, let alone having them as regular fixtures in our lives. He traced the rim of his glass, thoughtfully. But watching them together, seeing how they fill in missing pieces of each other, I can't imagine asking her to lose them again. Family expands in unexpected ways, I observed, returning to the table with my steaming cup. When I married your father, I never imagined the paths our family would take. Daniel reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You've been the constant. Through all of it, Mom. The fixed point we all revolve around. His words warmed me more than the tea. We sat in comfortable silence, mother and son, as the moon traced its path across the night sky, each lost in thoughts about the strange, unpredictable geometry of family. 2 weeks after the funeral, life began settling into new patterns. Jimena had returned to Colombia temporarily to wrap up her affairs before her move to Austin. Elisa had extended her stay, occupying my guest room and developing a special bond with Julian, who adored his newfound aunt's irreverent humor and seemingly endless patience for video games and dinosaur facts. Natalia had transformed as well. The rigid perfectionism that had defined her for so long softened around the edges. She laughed more easily, spoke more openly, as if the weight of her secrets had been physically pressing down on her all these years. One afternoon, I found her in Julian's room, sorting through old baby clothes she'd meticulously preserved. "Spring cleaning?" I asked, pausing in the doorway. She looked up with a smile that reached her eyes, something I'd rarely seen before recent events. "Something like that. I'm giving some of these to a women's shelter downtown. Others I'm setting aside for Elisa." "Elisa?" I questioned, sitting on the edge of Julian's bed. Natalia nodded. "She's pregnant, about 3 months along. She hasn't told anyone else yet. She only told me because we were talking about morning sickness remedies our mother used to make." "That's wonderful news," I said warmly, though I'm surprised she's facing motherhood on her own. "That's the thing," Natalia said, folding a tiny sweater with practiced hands. "She's been seeing someone for almost 2 years, a professor she met while translating at a conference. He lives in Chicago. They've been doing long distance, but with everything that's happened," she hesitated, "she's considering moving there, starting a family together." "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," Natalia admitted. "I've just found my sisters again. The idea of Elisa being in Chicago while Jimena's in Austin and we're here, it feels like we're scattering again, just in a smaller radius." I nodded, understanding her fear, but this time by choice, not necessity, and with the ability to visit, call, be part of each other's lives. "I know you're right." She sighed. I've missed so much already." We sat in companionable silence as she continued sorting baby clothes, each tiny garment a physical reminder of time's passage. "Eleanor," she said suddenly, looking up with serious eyes, "I want to thank you for everything. Most mothers-in-law would have judged me harshly for keeping such secrets from their son. Most mothers-in-law haven't lived enough life to understand why people keep secrets," I replied gently. "Still, your acceptance means more than I can express." I reached out to squeeze her hand. "Family isn't about perfection, Natalia. It's about acceptance. About creating space for people to be fully themselves, flaws and fears included." She nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. "My mother used to say something similar. Before everything fell apart." The mention of her mother brought a question that had been lingering in my mind. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. When did you last see your mother? Before Miami, I mean." Pain flickered across her features. "The day they separated us. June 15th, 1996. I was 13. She kissed each of us goodbye at the airport, promised it was temporary, said she would find us when it was safe." Her voice grew distant with memory. She was wearing a yellow dress and the gold earrings her mother had given her. She smelled like cinnamon and coffee. I memorized everything about that moment, played it over and over in my head during those first terrible nights in Miami. "And you never looked for her?" I asked carefully, not wanting to sound accusatory. "I tried once," Natalia admitted, "when I was 18 and legally free to make my own choices. But by then, she'd disappeared, moved from the last address I had, changed her phone number. The few distant relatives I could contact claimed not to know where she was." She shook her head. "Later, I learned she'd been doing the same thing I was, changing names, moving frequently, staying under the radar. We were searching for each other in circles, always just missing the connection. Until the end." I murmured. Until the end, she agreed softly. Though Jimena had almost 6 months with her before. She trailed off, unable to finish. Your mother knew you were coming, I reminded her. She died knowing all her daughters were reunited, that you would have each other moving forward. That's no small comfort. Natalia nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped. I keep thinking about all the parallel lives we led. How Elisa struggled through foster care in Boston while I was being shuttled between distant relatives in Miami. How Jimena was dancing professionally in Bogota while I was studying business administration at Florida State. How we all experienced the same events. First loves, heartbreaks, accomplishments, separately. But now you have time to share those stories, I pointed out, to fill in those missing chapters for each other. She smiled faintly. We've been doing exactly that. Late at night, after everyone's asleep, we talk for hours. It's like discovering pieces of myself I never knew were missing. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, and we both looked up to see Elisa standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Sorry to interrupt, she said softly. Daniel's looking for you, Nat. Something about Julian's soccer registration. Natalia rose, gathering the sorted baby clothes into neat piles. I'll be right down. As she passed her sister, she squeezed her arm gently, a silent communication passing between them. After Natalia left, Elisa lingered, her gaze falling on the baby clothes spread across the bed. She told you, she stated, not a question. I nodded. Congratulations. Children are life's greatest adventure. Elisa moved into the room, running her fingers lightly over a tiny knitted cap. I'm terrified, she admitted. I never had stable parental figures after our separation. My aunt in Boston was cold, practical, but unaffectionate. I don't know how to be a mother. Neither did I when I had Daniel, I confessed. No one does, really. We all just do our best with what we know. But you had a normal childhood, didn't you? Parents who loved you, stability, safety. I smiled sadly, thinking of my own complicated history. My father was an alcoholic who disappeared for days at a time. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Normal is a relative term, Elisa. Surprise registered on her face. Natalia always described your family as so perfect. Perfect from the outside, perhaps. But every family has its struggles, its secrets, its wounds. I patted the bed beside me and she sat, her posture mirroring Natalia's earlier position so exactly, it sent a shiver of déjà vu down my spine. You're thinking about Chicago, I said gently. About the professor. She nodded. James, we've been serious for a while now, but with everything happening with our mother, with finding Natalia again, she sighed. The timing feels impossible. There's never a perfect time for major life changes, I offered. They come when they come, ready or not. James has been incredibly patient. He flew down for the funeral, did you know? Stayed in a hotel nearby, didn't pressure me for time or attention. Just wanted me to know I wasn't alone. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat abdomen. He wants us to get married, to raise this child together in Chicago where he has tenure. And what do you want? Everything, she said with a small laugh. I want my sisters back in my life. I want this. Baby to know its aunts, its cousin. I want a future with James. I want to stop running from the past. She looked at me directly. Is that too much to ask? Not at all, I assured her. It just requires creativity, commitment, frequent flyer miles. That startled a genuine laugh from her. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, I corrected, but possible, especially now with technology to bridge distances and enough financial stability that travel isn't an impossible luxury. Elisa was quiet for a moment, considering. Natalia will be hurt. Initially, perhaps. But she loves you. She'll want your happiness, just as you want hers. How did you get so wise, Eleanor? She asked, echoing Daniel's question from weeks before. I've lived long enough to make plenty of mistakes and learn. From most of them, I replied with a smile. That's all wisdom really is, paying attention to life's lessons. Later that evening, as everyone gathered for dinner in my suddenly bustling dining room, I watched the intricate dance of family dynamics with fresh eyes. Daniel and Gabriel bookended the table, their familiar sibling banter a constant through all the recent changes. Julian bounced between topics with childish enthusiasm, drawing everyone into his 7-year-old world of soccer games and school projects. But it was the sisters who captivated me. Natalia and Elisa, mirror images engaged in the complex work of rebuilding connection while establishing boundaries. They moved in unconscious synchronicity, passing dishes before the other asked, finishing each other's sentences, sometimes communicating with just a glance or raised eyebrow. I thought about Jimena, the third piece of their puzzle, preparing to join them in a new capacity, and about James in Chicago, unknown to me but soon to be connected to all of us through Elisa and her child, about the invisible threads that would stretch between Austin, San Antonio, and Chicago, creating a new family geometry, complex but unbreakable. As plates were cleared and conversation flowed into the living room, I remained at the table, savoring the moment. My quiet house had become the crossroads for lives converging after long separation. My family had expanded in ways I never could have predicted that morning 2 weeks ago when my neighbor spotted a woman who both was and wasn't my daughter-in-law entering my home. Gabriel appeared at my side, coffee cup in hand. "Penny for your thoughts, Mom?" I smiled up at my youngest, the traveler, the observer, just thinking about life's strange paths, how sometimes the longest route turns out to be the right one. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Like three sisters separated for 20 years, finding each other just when they needed it most? Exactly like that. Summer gave way to fall, painting San Antonio in rich amber hues. 5 months had passed since the day Judy Thompson spotted someone she thought was Natalia entering my house, setting in motion revelations that transformed our family forever. In that time, our constellation had shifted and expanded. Jimena had settled in Austin, teaching dance at a prestigious arts academy. Her weekend visits became a cherished ritual, Julian counting down the days until the fun aunt would arrive with stories of her students and sometimes impromptu dance lessons in my living room. Elisa and James married in a simple ceremony in my backyard, with Julian as ring bearer and the sisters as each other's attendants. The sight of them standing together, Natalia and Jimena in matching deep blue dresses, Elisa in a flowing white gown that accommodated her growing belly, brought tears to my eyes. James proved to be exactly what Elisa needed. Steady, intellectual, with a quiet humor that balanced her more vibrant personality. They'd found a compromise regarding location. James had arranged a sabbatical year to join Elisa in San Antonio until the baby was born, after which they would return to Chicago together, with frequent visits planned. Daniel and Natalia emerged stronger from the upheaval, their relationship deepened by honesty and shared challenges. Watching them now, I could see how the revelation of Natalia's past had freed something in both of them. She no longer carried the burden of secrecy, and he no longer sensed that unnamed barrier between them. Gabriel, ever the observer, moved through these changes with adaptable grace. He'd adjusted his flight routes to include more stops in Chicago, promising to be a present uncle despite the distances. Sometimes I caught him watching the sisters together, a thoughtful expression on his face as if still processing the improbability of their existence. As for me, I found myself in an unexpected role as the axis around, which this expanded family revolved. My quiet home became the gathering place for holiday celebrations, weekend dinners, and the weekly video calls with Jimena when she couldn't join us in person. On a crisp October evening, we gathered in my backyard for an impromptu barbecue. Daniel manned the grill while Julian and Jimena kicked a soccer ball across the lawn. James and Gabriel discussed the merits of various Chicago jazz clubs, their friendship a pleasant surprise. Natalia and Elisa sat at the patio table, their heads bent together over a photo album, one of many their mother had compiled during their years apart. I brought out a tray of lemonade, setting it on the table between the sisters. "Find anything interesting?" Natalia looked up with a smile. "Mother's detective work was impressive. Look at this. She somehow got a copy of my college graduation program. I'm listed under Elena Diaz, the name I was using then. She never gave up on finding you," Elisa said softly. "On finding all of us." "I wish I'd known," Natalia murmured. "All those years thinking she'd moved on." "We can't change the past," I reminded her gently. "Only how we honor it moving forward." Elisa rested a hand on her now prominent belly. "That's what we're doing, isn't it? Honoring her by being the family she always wanted us to be." The baby chose that moment to kick forcefully, visible even through Elisa's sweater. Natalia laughed, placing her hand beside her sister's to feel the movement. "Active little one. Takes after Jimena." "God help us all," Elisa groaned good-naturedly. She glanced toward James, who was laughing at something Gabriel said. "I'm still terrified, about being a mother." "You'll be wonderful," Natalia assured her. "Besides, this child will have more support than any baby in history. 2 aunts who look exactly like its mother." Julian's already planning to be the world's best cousin. And don't forget Grandma Eleanor, I added with a smile. Eliza reached for my hand, squeezing it gratefully. Never. You're the foundation of all this, you know. Without your acceptance, your understanding that day. She didn't need to finish the thought. We all knew how differently things might have unfolded if I'd reacted with fear or rejection to the startling discovery of Natalia's duplicated presence in my home. Daniel called that dinner was ready, and as everyone gathered around the table, I took a moment to absorb the scene. My sons content in their different ways. Julian, thriving amidst the expanded family. The three sisters, no longer fragments, but a completed whole. And the new connections forming between all of us. James, the baby on the way, the future stretching before us with possibilities none of us could have imagined months ago. Later, as dishes were cleared and conversations continued under strings of patio lights, Gabriel joined me at the edge of the yard, where I'd retreated for a moment of quiet reflection. Quite a family we've ended up with, he observed, hands in his pockets as he gazed at the group on the patio. Indeed, I agreed. Not what I expected at this stage of life. Regrets? He asked, glancing at me. Sideways. Not a single one, I assured him. Though I do wonder what your father would make of all this. Gabriel smiled. Dad would have taken it in stride, just like you did. He always said you were the bravest person he knew. The compliment warmed me. I've been thinking about family lately. How we define it. How it evolves. How the simple truth is that family is who we choose to love, regardless of blood or circumstance. Speaking of family, Gabriel said, a slight hesitation in his voice, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. I turned to him fully, noting the unusual nervousness in my typically confident son. What is it? I've been seeing someone. It's serious. He smiled, a private expression I hadn't seen before. Her name is Sophia. She's a pediatric surgeon. I met during a layover in Boston last year. Gabriel, that's wonderful news. Why haven't you mentioned her before? He shrugged, suddenly looking boyish despite his 33 years. With everything happening with Natalia's family, it didn't seem like the right time, but I've asked her to move to San Antonio. She's considering positions at the Children's Hospital here. Joy bloomed in my chest. I can't wait to meet her. There's more, he admitted. She has a daughter, Lily. She's 4 and she's... He searched for words. She's amazing, Mom. Smart. Funny. With this incredible imagination. Her father isn't in the picture. Hasn't been since she was born. The implication was clear. Gabriel wasn't just bringing a partner into our family, but potentially becoming a father figure to a young child. The thought of my youngest son, always the free spirit choosing such responsibility, spoke volumes about his feelings for this woman and her daughter. Bring them to dinner next week, I said, squeezing his arm. Let's expand this family even further. His relief was palpable. You're remarkable, you know that? Most people your age would be overwhelmed by all this change. I laughed, softly. At 65, I've learned that life rarely follows the paths we expect. The joy comes in embracing the detours. As we rejoined the others on the patio, Julian broke away from the group to grab my hand, pulling me toward Jimena. Grandma, Aunt Jimena is teaching us a Venezuelan folk dance. You have to learn it too. Allowing myself to be drawn into the circle, I watched as Jimena demonstrated the steps, her movements graceful despite the casual setting. Natalia and Elisa joined in, their synchronized movements highlighting their identical features, while their varying styles revealed their distinct personalities. Daniel caught my eye across the patio, raising his glass in a silent toast. I nodded in acknowledgement, my heart full to bursting with the simple miracle of family. Not the one I'd planned or expected, but the one that had found us nonetheless. As twilight deepened around us and laughter echoed through my backyard, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Judy Thompson to my door that September morning, setting in motion revelations that might have shattered a lesser family, but had ultimately strengthened ours. December arrived, bringing with it unseasonably chilly weather to San Antonio and a flurry of preparations for Elisa's baby. The nursery in her and James's temporary apartment took shape, filled with gifts from our expanding circle, a hand-carved rocking chair from Daniel, a collection of bilingual children's books from Jimena, a mobile of stars and planets from Gabriel and Sophia, who had indeed moved to San Antonio and integrated seamlessly into our family gatherings. The sisters had established a new tradition of Sunday brunches at my house, a time for connection regardless of busy schedules. On one such Sunday, with winter sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, Natalia arrived early to help me prepare. I can't believe Elisa's already at 8 months, she remarked, slicing fruit for a colorful salad. It seems like just yesterday we were all discovering each other's existence. Time moves differently after major life changes, I observed, mixing batter for my legendary pancakes. First it crawls as we adjust, then suddenly it's racing. Natalia nodded, her movements precise and efficient as always. I've been thinking about that day a lot lately, about how differently things might have gone. How so? If you had reacted with fear instead of curiosity when you found Elisa upstairs, if Daniel had been unable to accept my past, if Gabriel hadn't been so adaptable about suddenly acquiring 2 new sisters-in-law. She shook her head in wonder. So many points where this could have all fallen apart. But it didn't, I reminded her, because underneath the shock and confusion, there was love. And love, if it's genuine, is remarkably resilient. The doorbell rang, announcing the first arrivals. Soon the house filled with familiar voices, Elisa's laugh, James's thoughtful observations, Julian's excited chatter as he showed Lily, Gabriel's girlfriend's daughter, his collection of model airplanes. Jimena arrived last, bringing pastries from a Venezuelan bakery she'd discovered in Austin. As we gathered around the table, I took in the scene with quiet satisfaction. Gabriel sat with his arm casually draped across Sophia's chair, while Lily had positioned herself firmly between Julian and Elisa, apparently fascinated by the prospect of the coming baby. Daniel engaged James in a discussion about educational philosophy, their mutual respect evident in their animated exchange. The sisters occupied one side of the table, their identical profiles creating an arresting visual as they passed dishes and finished each other's thoughts. "Before we eat," Elisa announced, placing a hand on her rounded belly, "James and I have something to share." She glanced at her husband, who nodded encouragingly. "We've decided on a name for the baby. We wanted you all to be the first to know." The table quieted, all attention focused on the expectant parents. "If it's a boy," James said, "we'll name him after my grandfather, Thomas. And if it's a girl," Elisa continued, her voice softening, "we've chosen Carmen Eleanor, after her grandmother's." My hand flew to my heart, unexpected emotion making it difficult to speak. "It's perfect," Natalia said, reaching across the table to squeeze her sister's hand. Jimena nodded agreement, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm deeply honored," I managed finally. "Thank you." The moment was interrupted by Julian's practical question. "But how will we know which grandma we're talking about? We can't say Grandma Carmen because she's in heaven, and we can't say Grandma Eleanor because that's confusing with the baby's name." His innocent logic broke the emotional tension, bringing laughter around the table. "What do you suggest, Julian?" Daniel asked, amused. Julian considered this seriously. "The baby can call Grandma Abuela. That's what Mom says her mother was called." Natalia smiled softly. "That's right. Our mother was Abuela to you, even though you never met her. It would be a beautiful connection." The meal proceeded with the comfortable rhythm our gatherings had developed, multiple conversations flowing, occasional bursts of laughter, the easy exchange of food and stories. As I looked around the table, I marveled at how quickly the extraordinary can become ordinary, how the impossible can transform into the everyday. After brunch, while the others scattered throughout the house and yard, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Jimena, the sister I'd had the least time to know. Unlike Elisa, who had settled temporarily into our daily lives, Jimena remained slightly separate due to distance, her personality still unfolding in weekend visits and video calls. "Need help with those?" she asked, nodding toward the dishes I was loading into the dishwasher. "I wouldn't turn it down," I replied, with a smile. We worked in companionable silence for a few moments before she spoke again. "I want to thank you, Eleanor, for everything you've done for my sisters, for accepting us all so completely. No thanks necessary. Your family." She shook her head, a gesture so like Natalia it momentarily disoriented me. "It's more than that. You've created a safe harbor for all of us. After a lifetime of separation and secrets, that's no small gift." I considered her words, thinking about the past months and the journey we'd all undertaken together. Perhaps that's what family should be, a safe harbor in life's storms. Jimena handed me the last plate. "You know, our mother used to say something similar. She called family el refugio del corazón, the heart's refuge." "She sounds like a wise woman," I said softly. She was. Jimena leaned against the counter, her expression reflective. In those final weeks when she knew she was dying, she told me her greatest regret was separating us. She thought she was protecting us, but she came to believe she'd made a terrible mistake. She did what she thought was right in an impossible situation, I said. And in the end, you all found each other again. There's grace in that. Yes, Jimena agreed. Though I wish she could have seen this, all of us together, Elisa's baby on the way, new connections forming, the family expanding rather than contracting. From the living room came the sound of Natalia calling everyone for a game of charades, apparently a Torres family tradition from their childhood that had been revived in recent months. We should join them, I suggested, before Julian sends a search party. As we moved toward the doorway, Jimena paused. One more thing, Eleanor. I've been offered a permanent position at the Dance Academy in Austin, with a substantial raise and my own studio for community outreach programs. That's wonderful news, I said warmly. You're putting down roots. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. For the first time since I was 13, I'm choosing to stay somewhere, to build something lasting. The significance of her decision wasn't lost on me. After a lifetime of temporary arrangements and cautious attachments, Jimena was committing to a future intertwined with her sisters, with our expanding family constellation. In the living room, chaos reigned as teams were formed for charades. Julian insisted on being paired with Lily, while Gabriel and Sophia formed another team. Daniel and Natalia, long-standing charades partners, took their position with practiced confidence. James, still finding his footing in family game traditions, joined Elisa on the sofa, his hand resting protectively on her belly. Jimena and I exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to partner up for the game. As we took our places, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought us all to this moment. How a simple case of mistaken identity, Judy Thompson seeing someone she thought was Natalia, had unraveled secrets and reconnected lives that had been separate for decades. Later, as the afternoon stretched into evening and guests began to depart, I found myself standing in the doorway of my home, watching Natalia help Julian into their car while Daniel loaded leftovers into the trunk. Across the street, Judy Thompson was retrieving her mail, and she waved cheerfully in our direction. I waved back, thinking about how little she knew about the role she'd played in our family's transformation. For her, it had been a simple neighborly observation. Natalia entering my house when she, shouldn't have been there. For us, it had been the pebble that started an avalanche, revealing truths, healing wounds, creating new beginnings. As the last car pulled away and I closed the door on the winter evening, I felt a profound sense of completion. Our family had been forever altered, expanded in ways I never could have imagined. Yet somehow, we had come full circle, finding our way back to what truly matters: love expressed honestly, bonds strengthened by challenge, truth acknowledged without fear. The phone rang just as I settled into my favorite chair, exhausted but content after the day's gatherings. It was Gabriel. "Mom," he said without preamble, "I wanted to let you know I'm going to ask Sophia to marry me on Christmas Eve." Joy bubbled up inside me. "That's wonderful news. Gabriel, I wanted you to be the first to know. Well, after Lily, I asked for her blessing this afternoon while everyone was playing charades." He chuckled. "She made me promise to still take her flying even after I become her official dad." "A reasonable request," I said, smiling at the thought of my son negotiating with the precocious 4-year-old who had stolen all our hearts. "I never thought I'd find this, Mom," Gabriel continued, his voice suddenly serious. "A family of my own, someone to come home to after all those flights. Life surprises us when we least expect it," I replied. "Look at our family now, compared to a year ago." "It all started with that phone call," Gabriel mused. "Me on that Miami flight, seeing someone who couldn't possibly be there. Full circle," I murmured. As we said our goodbyes, I gazed around my quiet living room, still bearing evidence of the day's gathering. A forgotten scarf draped over a chair, a child's drawing left on the coffee table, the faint lingering scent of Jimena's Venezuelan pastries. My thoughts drifted to Carmen Torres, the mother who had made the heartbreaking decision to separate her daughters for their safety, who had spent decades collecting fragments of their lives from afar, who had lived long enough to see them reunited. I hoped she could somehow see what her family had become, expanded, blended, strengthened by the very trials that once threatened to destroy it. Outside my window, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I thought about the baby soon to join our family, possibly bearing my name alongside Carmen's, about Gabriel and Sophia building their future together with Lily, about Daniel and Natalia, their marriage deepened by honesty hard won, about Jimena putting down roots after a lifetime of transience, And James adapting his life to embrace Elisa's reconnected family. From a single moment of mistaken identity, footsteps behind me when they shouldn't have been possible, had grown this rich tapestry of connections, this constellation of lives intertwining in ways none of us could have foreseen. Family, I reflected, is ultimately about echoes, how we reverberate in each other's lives, how patterns repeat and transform across generations, how a single action can ripple outward in ways we never anticipate. And in those echoes, if we listen carefully, we hear the truest story of who we are.